Welcome to our webinar. The title is Pragmatic and Return of Investment Driven Approach to Gen AI Initiatives in 2024. I'll be your moderator, Vikram Penley. I'm the CTO here at Genzeon, and I'm joined by Harsh and Prashant. And I'll give a chance to our panelists to kind of introduce themselves. We'll start with your side of the world, Harsh. Just introduce yourself quickly, and then we'll turn over to Prashant, and then we can start our real discussion for which everybody's waiting here.
Thanks, Vikram, and thanks for moderating the session. My name is Harsh. I head the healthcare division at Genzeon. Glad to be a part of this discussion today. Certainly quite a passionate topic around Gen AI, where I had the opportunity to speak with a few folks over the last few months, and happy to share things that I have learned and what Genzeon is doing in this area, and especially more importantly, what the industry is doing. Specifically in this area. So thanks for joining, and thanks, Vikram, for moderating the session. Back to you.
Prashant, your quick introduction.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Vikram, for moderating. Prashant Krishna Kumar. I lead the digital data and AI engineering here in Genzeon. As Harsh mentioned, Gen AI is a topic which we are all passionate about, which we are heavily focused here on Genzeon. And as part of this webinar, we'll share our experience in the last 1 year as we have gone through the journey of adopting Gen AI, building solutions around Gen AI, what we're seeing in the industry, what we're seeing on the technology side. We'll share those things, and hopefully it's beneficial and helpful to all of you.
Thank you, Prashant. And with that, the very first question is pretty much for you, Prashant. What is hype and what is real with Gen AI, right? We have seen many technologies come in the past. We talked about blockchain. We talked about the revolution that cryptocurrency would bring to the world. And now everybody's talking about Gen AI, right? Recent conferences, healthcare, and either other verticals, right? Everybody talks about Gen AI. We need some help in kind of understanding what is real and what is hype.
Right. So I'll start off with saying that Gen AI definitely is a drop the mic movement in the industry, right? It's similar to what, in my opinion, what happened in the late 90s, early 2000 with internet coming of age, right? It is going to be revolutionary to a great degree, but obviously it's also misunderstood to a great degree, right? So that's why peeling the onion, if I may say, of to understand what is real and why what is hype is really important. What it does really well, Gen AI, is it's able to, as the name suggests, right? It's able to generate text, contextual text based on a question, right? It can, because at the end of the day, Gen AI is powered by what we call as large language models, which have been trained on billions of parameters, right? It's a generalized training. It's trained on vast variety of topics and other things, right? So you can have a conversation with Gen AI, ask general questions, and it'll reply back, most of the time with a, with an answer which makes sense and has context to that question you're asking, right? And the better the context you can paint, better the answer you get. Similarly, it can generate images, right? Which is truly revolutionary, right? Because to a degree, chatbots have been there for a while, right? NLP, natural language processing, has been there for a while. So what Gen AI does is, in a text world, as I've given an example, NLP did it to a degree. Gen AI take it to another level, right? But the generation of images, generation of other kind of media, right, is new, right? It was there, but not to this degree. This is truly revolutionary from that point of view, right? Industries are getting disrupted because of Gen AI, right? So again, but at the end of the day, it augments human intelligence, right? The whole hype about Gen AI is going to replace humans is truly hype, right? The sentience has not been achieved yet, right? So Gen AI, the solutions we are seeing in the industry is around Gen AI working hand in hand with humans, right, to solve problems, right? It provides specific answers. Somebody has to review it and move it forward, right? And it has vast applications, right, from healthcare, real estate, right, finance, right? Applications in all of the industries that we know of that are there, right? But again, it's an augmentation of the the work we do to a great degree. right? It's not really replacement, and that hype is, is the key of everything we hear, right? That it's going to completely replace the work we do, right? Yes, along those lines, the right now where the technology is the concept of super intelligence, right? I mentioned the word sentience, right? Um, it's already there is not true as well, right? Again, it works in certain boundaries. Given the problem statement, it's able to produce a good enough answer, which machines could not do before. That's really the problem it solves. So again, that's a context. But having said that, what's real is that it's going to disrupt them in many things, right? Especially in the world of healthcare where we live and breathe in Genzeon. It's really going to be a game changer. And I want Harsh to maybe weigh in on what he's seeing on from a market point of view, from a healthcare point of view, how this technology will be disruptive.
Thanks, Prashant. And I think very, very valid question, Vikram. I think in the industry, right, everybody's excited and scared at the same time. And I think, when that happens, that fear takes over in some industries, and in certain industries, people just take advantage of the technology for what it is. So I think, it's good to start with the picture of what the technology is, which is what Prashant did here, right? I think it's important to understand the context. Now, when it comes to industry application, I would say um, two things. I think one is the fact that industry is ready and all CIOs are talking about it, and all the board of directors are asking the CIOs and CEOs that, hey, how are we going to use Gen AI? Tells the fact that it's arrived, right? It's come to the discussion table. It's the topic of discussion when we went to AHIP or Vive last year, and when we go to Vive this year, and we go to conferences. The primary discussion topic is Gen AI and how that's going to disrupt the industry, and in our case, healthcare industry, right? So when I participate with a lot of user groups on LinkedIn and we talk about that, the discussion again is about where the hype is, right? And hype is, to Prashant's point, I think, it's not going to replace the doctor or the nurse in a health system, right? That's not where we are. That's not where the technology is. But it's very much there today, where some of the operational aspects could be automated, and majority of other business functions, especially clinical functions, can be augmented, right? I think is the key word. If I was to use that word, is we are talking about augmentation and not replacement. But I don't want to ignore the fact recently there were a good number of layoffs in what I call the FANG market, right? Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and Googles of the world, right? There were layoffs, and they were in the IT industry. And Gen AI did actually replace some of the IT folks, even though it may not have replaced healthcare folks. It did replace some of the IT folks and their jobs, right? So I think it's important to recognize what is happening in the industry, where the market is, and market is reacting to how fast the technology is maturing. It's not where 2 months back where the market was, right? Every couple of months you got to realize that technology evolves, right? As you can probably measure, GPT came from GPT 1.0 to GPT 4.0, right, relatively quickly. And the capabilities of what is there is evolving very, very fast. So I think it'll be unfair for us to say we know where this is going. I think we know somewhat where it's going, maybe 6 months out. Where it will be 2 years out, it's the story is yet to be written on that. So
The thing I'll add to what Harsh said was the whole in the FANG market, right? FANG companies, right? The replacement is really happening because employees have become more productive now, right?
correct.
Because of so it's not that it's really replaced humans, just that people are more productive, and to do the body of work that you need 10 people, now you need 5 people, right? That's the reason. It's productivity thing going up rather than humans really getting replaced. So that's the only caveat I would offer.
No, fair point. Fair point, Prashant. Yep.
Harsh, when we are talking about Gen AI, especially in the healthcare, right? One of the things which comes up in discussion is patient safety, right?
Mhm.
So, what is your perspective on that? How how are we dealing with patient safety in this age of Gen AI?
Yeah, this is one of the hot topics that was, I think, on discussion on Chime Fall Forum that I was a part with healthcare CIOs, and the discussion became, hey, clinically, if the decision impacts the life of a human being, hence, are we ready for Gen AI to make those decisions? And I think there was a pretty good consensus in the market there, or at least in that conference, which represents the market, that we are ready for augmentation of clinical staff, right? They need data. I think Gen AI does an absolutely wonderful job summarizing content, bringing the right content, bringing the right context and awareness to the clinical staff that's making the decisions. But it's augmenting their workflow. I would venture to say there is another question that is not being asked. And I wrote a blog and an article on LinkedIn on this, which is we're not asking the question, what is patient safety without Gen AI and what is patient safety with Gen AI? So when you don't apply Gen AI, right, or these technologies that help patient safety, we are not asking the question around what I think autonomous driving folks would say, right? What's the safety when a driver is working and driving the car versus when a Waymo or a Cruise is driving the car, right? What's the safety factor? So I think it's important to look at both sides of the equation from a patient safety standpoint, that we need to use technology for the benefit it brings, but at the same time be aware of the pitfalls and build the guardrails and the governance structures and support the ecosystem in a way that you're not impacting patient safety negatively, right? So I think augmentation is the key word here, Vikram, I would say, based on what I've heard and learned from all the leaders in the industry and the folks who are applying this technology on the ground. But I think it's very, very important not to be left behind in augmenting your clinical staff as well, because it has value to add and it has impact that brings patient safety in a positive fashion.
So, Harsh, the augmentation in the past, we saw lots of rules-based approaches to that, right? So there was a concept of clinical decision systems. They were all rules-based. And today, one of the fears is that we have lost the trust and explainability with Gen AI, right? With rules-based engine, you know exactly what the rules are, and you know what the system is, how it's evaluating the rules to come to a decision. With Gen AI, the fear is that you do not have that explainability and that trust. What are the folks doing for that, Harsh? Like, is it still under discussion? Did they solve this problem? What are people doing for that?
I'll share my thought and then I'll pass it over to Prashant for his thoughts and ideas on this as well, right? So I think if I look back, right, I think when rules engine came, even that time there were concept of black boxes, right? Underwriting decision making in property and casualty remained a black box for a long time. And then explainability came. When AI came before Gen AI, there was the concept of AI made the decision, and then explainable AI came, right? You could explain how AI is coming to a decision. I think we are going through the same maturity curve. I think we'll get to the same place where Gen AI can explain the reasoning behind its decision as well, in a reasonable enough fashion, and we'll be able to test the aspect of Gen AI in a fashion where we feel comfortable with its decision-making criteria as well. I think we'll get there. I think it's a maturity curve, but I'll like to hear from Prashant on some of his thoughts as well.
No, I agree with you, Harsh. Right. So it's a challenge which is, I would say, not 100% solved. Right. That's a known thing, right, in the industry. It's there are techniques that are used to understand or explain it to a degree, but it's not always 100% solved, and that's one of the big reasons why there are concerns to adopt it in the healthcare industry, right? Especially given the if you don't know how a decision is being taken, right, the logic behind it, how do you know it's the right decision, right? Again, if you have to explain that decision anytime, right, especially in a legal construct. So it's a challenge, but again, I know there are companies out there focused currently on how to improve that, right? And even the advent of now from large language models, we are moving to small language models, right? SLMs as they call it, right? I feel with that and the number of parameters that it's trained on, it becomes a little bit easier. Still but the foundation of all this is neural networks, right? So that there is still, I think, there is some more runway before this problem gets completely solved today, right? Um, as I said, there are techniques that people use today, right? Techniques like Line, SHAP, and those kind of things are used today in the industry to get some level of explainability, but it's not 100% yet. It's a problem that is still being worked on.
Understood, Prashant. So let's move on to our next topic, right? And this one specifically for you, Harsh, because you have been on the domain side a lot. Um, what use cases are the health systems currently using the Gen AI for? There's a lot of talk around it, but some of the health systems have already started their journey, right? What did they first pick up, and what are they trying to do with it, Harsh?
That's a very fair question, and I know we have put together a whole slide to discuss the whole impact of this, right, and what the health systems are. So, if you want to bring up that slide, I'll talk about essentially the aspect of the coverage that we are seeing and how folks are talking about the impact. So, two things. I think the message I started with, right, which is the fact around people are first starting with things that do not impact patient safety, right? That's a comfort zone. That's an area where there is less risk. Folks need to get comfortable with technology. Folks need to get comfortable with the risk. Folks need to get comfortable with the impact it's having, get some wins on the ground, right? And then take on harder problems, right? So if you think about impact scale, right, it's very easy. You'll see a lot of this, and I think Prashant hit on this, right? The chatbots were there before Gen AI, right? Now chatbots are there with Gen AI, right? It's an easier way to say, it takes 2 minutes nowadays to send up a chatbot on a website and say, hey, answer the questions around, what does this company do? What are our offerings are, what our services are. I know we have done that at Genzeon very quickly, right? We built a whole platform for that, for companies to stand up chatbots relatively quickly, right? Easy use in health systems. If you can imagine, there are a couple of very interesting use cases around chatbots that came out as we are talking to clients, right? One has been AR providers. We have always new nurses and providers joining. There is a document that acts as a help guide for EMRs. People may be coming from health systems that did not use Epic. Now we are using Epic. How can these folks be on the job, be trained on Epic? They need to know where to enter what code. They can ask a question to the chatbot, right? And quickly get an answer, and it tells you what to do in case of Epic, right? Very logical, very useful construct to make sure physicians are spending time and not going through help docs and spending a lot of time there. Consumers going to a provider website, hey, I'm a Medicare, Medicaid patient, I'm dual eligible. How should I file this claim? Okay, who do I go to first? Right? What should I do? Right? The information is there on a provider's website. Put a chatbot out there, the consumer can ask those questions, right? So chatbots are a very easy place for folks to start and get comfortable with in a very low risk fashion, right? The data that they're tapping into is data that is approved by the health system, and we're just using that data to answer that question, right? So very, very logical. I would say, a billing is another area where increasing transparency on what the bill is about, patients being able to ask questions about the bill. What is this about? What is this charge? What is this? We all have gone through scenarios where explanation of benefits are hard to understand. The claim explanation that comes is with a lot of codes, but you can ask the questions, you can understand it, right? You can put a chatbot that allows folks to understand their documents that they're getting from the provider's office, both in terms of bills and explanations, right? Second is augmenting clinical staff and the workforce there, right? When a patient goes there, you sign up as a new patient, a provider wants to get an understanding of your history. We all know, docs want to spend in a PCP visit 10 minutes with you or 15 minutes with you. Now you have a whole life history for them to be consumed and understood so that they can provide you guidance. Understanding patient history in a clinically summarized fashion that's relevant to the visit you're having is a great use case for Gen AI. It's really good at it. The technology is good at it. a big factor is around, I would say, um, denial management, that of providers are using, health systems are using the technology. There is a funny joke there that comes up in a lot of the conversations here, which is, we'll submit the claims and it'll be our bot against the bot that the payer has on their side, right? And the bots will be talking to each other. So it's a question of who writes the better bot, right? So that's an interesting conversation, but not very far from reality, actually, in a lot of ways. This will boil down to both providers and payers are automating that process, all right? And there will be bots on both sides, and it will matter on who writes the better bot, right? If you're not going to change the process, then it becomes an automation, fight over whose quality of the bot is better. So, that's another area where it's happening. I would say just there is a huge focus around reducing readmission. So if you go back to the extreme end, right, where the most impact is, right, at the end of the day, we are here to make sure patients get better care, right? So when patients get readmitted, and this is a big number especially in cardiac cases, I've done some research in that area, and significant number of cardiac patients get readmitted within 30 days to the health systems after an episode. And folks are looking at the solution set. So this is a AI and a Gen AI solution. I would not call it this is a Gen AI solution only, right? There's a huge amount of machine learning aspect to it, of the solution set in understanding what is driving readmissions, right? What are the feature set, if you may, that is responsible for it, right? But there is a Gen AI aspect to it, which is to improve adherence to the discharge plans that are provided to the patients, right? How do you provide the right support structure and the uh, discharge plan that a patient can adhere to, and how can you support them in adherence? There is Gen AI use cases around that. So, I think this is the spectrum. I started with very low impact, low risk use cases to some folks, where folks are trying different things, all the way up to patient safety, which is the core essence of why we are all here in healthcare, right? So I think hopefully that gives team and folks a flavor of what we have seen in the industry, what folks are working on. Can't ignore the fact that Microsoft and Nuance partnership is a key enabler in this space, and the whole concept of transcribing and taking patient notes and while the patient visit is going on is a big, big application of Gen AI. We are partners with Microsoft and Nuance in that space. We are very, very aware of the adoption. Epic and Microsoft are working together in that space as well. And that's a big area. I see constant improvement happening. But that's, again, was there before Gen AI. It's getting better with Gen AI. Right. So I think that's one aspect of it. An additional, maybe the final aspect, which is very close to my heart, is the aspect of what is referred to as inbox management, or what we refer to as clinical messaging triage, an area where Genzeon is quite focused on, which is how do we reduce the workload for the clinicians. We live in an age where everybody wants immediate gratification. I sent a message to the doctor, I want to know the answer to the question I asked, right? Docs have many things going on. They are seeing new patients. They're not quite there always to reply to your questions. And a lot of them are not questions for the clinical staff. They may be questions for the operations staff. But as EMRs open up the chat function and the message function, and the demographic starts to shift on using these technologies, it's becoming quite a challenge for clinical staff to answer those questions. So triaging what is relevant, what is a question for who, and what is the level of urgency for some of those questions, I think is a big challenge where Gen AI plays a role, and Genzeon is very focused on building solutions for that as well. Prashant, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is I think great set of use cases, right, which Gen AI will impact. But I think there is some struggle still around the scalability of the solutions, right? So again, if I look at GPT-4, right, there's a limit on each query has a limit on the number of bytes you can send, number of words you can send, right? So again, and so with that kind of a limit, how many concurrent users can you support if you build a solution which, especially you are opening up to the, the patient market, right?
Prashant, I'll
But then,
just change the topic a little bit here, right? Because you're getting into the one that we are going to talk,
yeah.
right? So it'll be perfect timing,
uh,
Prashant. Go ahead.
so again, I think as Vikram said, right, it ties into this topic, right? So the scalability in Gen AI is still, for some things it's been proved out, like chat GPT is today used by millions of people. It's working beautifully, right? But at the same time, as folks have tried to build specialized solutions, there are scalability challenges that are coming up, especially scenarios where you're running your own LLMs for that matter, right? Again, it's a case by case scenario, but scalability is a challenge, right? So with that though, I want to pivot to this question, if I may, right, Vikram? Um, so Gen AI, I see, is a specific area of AI, right? Again, NLP, computer vision, ML, still there, right? Still relevant. But at the same time, Gen AI is a generalized, what do they call it, right? A large language model which has been trained on GPT-4 is what, I don't know, 1.7 trillion parameters or something, right? Trained on a huge set of parameters, right? So it's generalized. So you can talk about it with sports. You can talk about finance. You can ask it to predict stocks, right? What to buy, what not to buy. It'll give you an answer, good, bad, or ugly, right? You won't know if you're going to lose money or not. But you can ask healthcare questions. People do that today, right? Again, not advisable to ask your personal healthcare questions. You should go to a doctor, but it will have a response, is what I'm trying to say. At the end of the day, any question you ask, it will have a response one way or the other, right? Because it's been trained on a massive data set, right? Now, with that context, I'm going to pivot to say, traditionally how it's been done is use NLP, OCR, ML have always created very pointed solutions we used to create. It was never generic. It was not generalized, right? It was always specific. Okay, take a data set of survey questions that somebody answered and run an NLP algorithm on top of it to get a sentiment, right? To build a machine learning model to predict if a claim should be approved or not, right? Very specific use cases were solved with, right? With Gen AI, since the scale is massive, right, the cost of training a LLM model typically is massive, right? Running it requires a level of scale of infrastructure, GPUs, right, which are expensive to run it. Which again, that there's a cost to it, right? Even with machine learning and NLP, yes, the GPU was there, was used, right? But again, LLM, the scale is different, right? Because of the size of the training data, as well as once it's trained, right? How you deploy it, how you manage it, the scale is different. So the cost of infrastructure, of development, deployment, maintenance typically goes up. But at the same time, so that's a cost. So in terms of training a model, it's definitely expensive. At the same time, the flip side is there is some angle of economies of scale here, right? Because once you train it on massive, you can ask any questions to it, right? And generalized questions. Whereas in previous, in the world of NLP, right, you had to to train different models for each of them, right? Now, one big solution, you can throw multiple problem statements at it, and it will give you an answer. You can upload a set of documents, and it consumes, and it's ready to answer that immediately, right? Because already trained on so much data that anything you throw at it, it's able to contextualize it fully and then able to answer questions very quickly, right? So once you set something up, the time to market for future solutions using that Gen AI LLM model is much faster. Whereas in the previous world, you have to create specific NLP models for different problems. So there is give and takes, right? As you look at the cost of where initial cost is high, after that execution cost, infrastructure cost might be high, but day-to-day solutions time to market will be reduced, right? um, Along those lines, right, one more thing, I think we touched on we touched on scalability as well as I think explainability, right? Explainability continues to be a challenge, right? And as I said, the cost there's a cost on explainability, if I may say, right? Because if things cannot be explained, you cannot use it at certain places, right? Certain use cases cannot be used, so it obviously you lose some power because of it, right? You can use it some specific use cases, some very specific, maybe highly regulated areas where you need the explainability of a decision making process. You cannot use any AI. So again, there is a cost element to that as well. There is a soft cost, if I may say, which you need to be thought about as well. Harsh, any specific things you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is very interesting to me, I saw that in the market as well, which is, we started with these LLM models. A lot of folks are familiar, GPT when it came, GPT-3, I think when it came, right? And we launched this, the Microsoft launched this, and folks asked questions. They were beautiful answers. They loved it. Everybody loved it. Over time, the quality degraded, right, of the answers. And folks are like, what the hell? It was great. What happened, right? What changed? And the aspect of what it comes, there is a cost to test the models, which is to make sure they are not starting to hallucinate, right? And there is a constant aspect of testing. I'll be curious, Prashant, what your take on the testing aspect of that is, and what you see that in that industry. But I know a lot of customers are talking about, hey, I want a private GPT, right? I want to control the data set that it's trained on. I want to manage it because once I go live, I don't want to keep testing every 3 months to know whether it's starting to have hallucinations, right? That's a very, very interesting question, right? Because in traditional software development, you built a software, it answered the question, it did it well, you went live, you didn't go back and start second guessing, is the system working, or is starting to give wrong answers. And so curious, Prashant, if you can speak a little bit on that aspect of it, and what your
So
thoughts are.
hallucination is a very real problem, right? And if I put a cost element of it, right, if you hallucinate and then give a wrong answer and then it's used for clinical or medical purposes, right, it's the cost cannot be even be, you cannot put a cost around it, is what I would say, right? So hallucination is a real problem. I know there are solutions coming in the industry, right? But at the same time, hallucination is driven so much by data, right, and the potential bias that exists in the data, right? So for me, the way I've always thought about
So, Prashant, let me
tuning.
interject there a little, right? We have a
Yeah.
question which is very relevant at this point, right? The question is, what role does data quality play in achieving a successful outcome from implementing this AI initiative, right? This was one of the
Yeah.
attendees who posted it. So it's a
Oh,
perfect timing for it, Prashant.
okay. So I'll add context as well, then, right? So, for me, like hallucination to a degree, right, can be addressed by having a very clean data set, right? Again, data engineering for Gen AI is its own, um, it's becoming its own branch, if I may say, right? Because to one is you need a certain set of to train, but at the same time there are always gaps in data, right? People looking at synthetic data generation, but is that the right approach, right? Sometimes you might have to go out and find those, see if we can fill those gaps in data. Sometimes you cannot, right? So data engineering problems to address or train a Gen AI model, or set up a Gen AI solution are slightly different from what we have seen before Gen AI came to fruition, right? So that's one part of it, right? So, and coming back to the hallucination point which Harsh made, right? The whole intent of doing QA that has been done, quality assurance or quality engineering that has traditionally been done in the industry, takes a different, you have to think about it totally different from a Gen AI point of view, right? Because not only are you doing QA and QC on the data upfront, right? Saying, and but also you're doing a Q and QC on the hallucination and if there is bias in the data, right? So both come to fruition. So again, but going back to that question that was asked, right? Data quality is the role that data quality plays is paramount, right? I cannot stress on it enough, right? There is a lot of time is spent in getting quality data and piping the data, right? Because at the end of the day, the way especially if you're using OpenAI APIs, there is the tokens that how the pricing is done, right? So there is a limit of data you want to send each call, right? So the piping of the data from a data engineering perspective, that also has to be figured out, right? Now, one last point I'll add is just going back to the cost of LLMs, right? What's happening in the industries, and I briefly mentioned that earlier, there is a SLMs are coming out, small language models, right? What small language models do is, again, the footprint of them is much smaller than an LLM, right? So because of the overall total cost of ownership to run an LLM solution goes down when you use SLM models, right? So again, Gen AI powered by SLM, it will get more and more prominent in terms of one running it in a local data center. You don't need potentially in cloud, right? The footprint is smaller, right? And can you run it on your mobile phone for that matter, right? Things like that will be explored in future as the cost goes down. Like I see this in back in late 90s, you used to get a Pentium PC with 64 GB RAM. It was expensive, right? Now it's nothing, right? With the scale of data, the hard disk and the RAM we deal with, same thing will happen in Gen AI also, right? So some of this cost will go down as we innovate around from large language models to SLMs to, I would say, domain specific models will start coming out. Very specific healthcare models which are SLMs focused on clinical triage might come out. Those kind of things will happen. It's in the, I say, in sometime in maybe in between 1 to 2 years, those things will start happening, and I think explainability will improve with that as well. So um, the cost will eventually go down. That will happen, but right now it's still cost prohibitive to run it on a local data center and not on cloud and those kind of things.
Yep. Thank you, Prashant. And with that, I think the next topic we're talking about was the approach, right? How to start the journey with the Gen AI, especially for the our healthcare clients, right, Harsh? What is your take on trying to take a platform approach for doing it versus doing it by a use case basis? What's your advice, Harsh?
Yeah, so I think more than advice, right? I'll share what I've found working and where clients are finding success, right? And I think it ties into all the four previous questions that we have asked, right? Which is around cost, explainability, what's hype, what's real, right? I think it's very important to take my point of view based on finding how clients are approaching this successfully. They're taking a platform approach to this. And the reason they're taking a platform approach to this is because this thing is evolving very, very fast, right? So that's one big reason, right? When you think today there is one use case, two use cases, then your board of directors says, hey, oh, great. We had great success with these two. You showed me the result. I'm open to us exploring 20 more use cases, right? If you take a use case based approach, which is, you build point solutions for this, the cost, quote unquote, of building solutions adds up dramatically, very, very quickly versus relative to a platform approach, right? You're building some technical capabilities, you're building a technical infrastructure and platform. When you do a use case approach, now you're building it 20 times that capabilities and that you need for developing those use cases. So I think that's one big thing that I've seen health systems take a platform approach. I think larger companies like Epic, Microsoft support that. I know Genzeon has a health intelligence platform that's focused on supporting clients go down that path as well, right? So I think work with your partners. But the suggestion I would have is look at it from a platform standpoint, because what you think is the use case today may not be the only use case you do in 2024. You may have great success and you may have four more use cases that you see real value that you can drive success within your organization, right? So platform approach will enable innovation to happen faster at a lower cost per use case, right? So I think that's one big thing. Second aspect, I think, which is also very critical beyond the money part of it, is the governance aspect of it, right? It's very, very important to put some level of governance and controls around Gen AI, right? There is a whole governance framework that we have developed working with clients on what is the guardrails that are needed for from a security, privacy, compliance standpoint, right? Guardrails that are needed from a hallucination that Prashant was talking about earlier, right? Guardrails that are needed from even where your IP that exists within your organization doesn't become Microsoft's IP or some other organization's IP as you share your data. How your data doesn't become available to other people to train their models on it. Hence, you lose the edge that you have in the market, right? All these are uh, relatively important discussion that need to happen within your organization with all the C-level execs, whether it is folks that are from a security privacy standpoint, or folks from your CFO who's looking at it from a return standpoint. So I think this decision of platform versus use case is really not an IT decision or not a not a decision at one BU level, right? It's an enterprise decision. And one of the other aspects we have seen is folks have tried both the centralized and the decentralized version of enabling Gen AI. And I know it'll get into the next piece of the conversation we want to have around the enablement model. But I think I would say in that context, we have seen more success in a centralized fashion, where folks have the right guardrails. It increases adoption, it increases the confidence of the organization to be able to take those baby steps into adding value to the organization. So again, these are some of the things that I've seen, Vikram. So more so in terms of how we have worked with clients and where clients are having success, right? So I don't think this is so much of a Genzeon's point of view versus where I think the market is actually. Market's point of view, where the success is being found purely from a cost economics and a governance standpoint.
That's very. We have another question from the attendees, right? I'll read it out to you. That talks about the reliability that we can have on the Gen AI platform, right? The question is, are there any examples of successful clinical implementations? And they're talking about order set creation, aftercare instructions, drug interactions, or is Gen AI still too dangerous for clinical applications? This is relevant to the conversation we were having earlier, right? How do we trust it? How do we put the guardrails?
I think there are success stories out there, right? I think drug interaction is a great example. I think one of the things, I think I touched on earlier, which is what is the patient safety without Gen AI and what's the patient safety with Gen AI. The number of drugs that are coming to market very, very quickly, drug solutions don't keep up to speed with new drugs in the market as well as they need to, right? So just like innovation is happening in the technology world with Gen AI, innovation is happening in the clinical world with the drugs and the new drugs coming to market and new research studies which are finding new interactions that were not earlier known, right? So I think leveraging technology to its benefit, I think drug interactions, absolutely, folks are working on that. I've talked to clients who are exploring and doing POCs on the drug interaction specifically piece. I think you mentioned a couple of more. I think one was order
Order set
management. This is
creation.
probably,
Yep.
so I think I do know in that context, not so much in the pharmacy context, but if I was to take the appointment setting context, in that context, I do know there is a lot of activity happening in that space using Gen AI and the tools and the proof of concepts that are happening in that space as well. I do believe, that whole integration with chatbots and appointment setting where customer experience is evolving. More on the clinical side, I would say clinical summarization is a big use case enabled by a lot of times by Microsoft and Epic and Nuance, right? But there are so many other solutions out there in the market for clinical summarization, right? We have our own solutions in our health intelligence platform where we get interoperability data from different HIEs. And as folks are evaluating, our clients in the life insurance industry leverage all that data and then are able to leverage the summarization view for making underwriting decisions in life insurance, for example, right? So there is clinical use cases out there, some leveraged very much in the scope of augmenting the clinical stuff. One big example that I am personally familiar with in this space is medical reviews that happen both in providers as a part of denial management, happens as a part of SMRC and MAX when they are doing audit reviews. CMS conducts audit reviews on SNFs and hospice cases and DMEs. In all of those cases, when you do medical reviews, the amount of time clinical staff spends on doing a medical review sometimes is 4 or 5 hours. And solutions that we have built on health intelligence platform have reduced that by 50%. So there are absolutely clinical cases out there, Vikram, that folks are using, but they are augmenting the clinical team. And given the shortages of clinical staff all over the country, post-pandemic. That's been a big problem statement. The use of Gen AI is becoming very prevalent in the augmentation space.
Thanks a lot, Harsh. Let's go to our
So,
next.
Vikram, if
Yep.
I may add one point to what
Oh yeah,
Harsh was
sure.
saying.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Prashant.
Uh, excuse me. Can you go back to the previous slide for a second?
Yep.
So, so, so just going back to the question also, right? What I would say is the human in loop design that is typically followed, right, in the clinical setting. You don't let an algorithm run loose, typically to do an end-to-end, process, to automate an end-to-end process, right? It's typically you are working with, a clinician. The output of or out the response that a chatbot, in this case powered by an LLM, is typically seen by a clinician or a nurse or someone who is trained to take understand it and take action, right? And the training element and the also the um, um, uh, the QC QA around it is slightly different from a clinical point of view, right? So there's a different approaches you need to take for that. But at the end of the day, I see it as always human in loop, where they are looking at a decision. It's really fast tracking the information they're getting. It's simplifying for them, right? And in many use cases we see is it's not changing the information, not creating new information. It might get 20 pages of information and it just creates summary for you, right? So in those scenarios, the risk of um, hallucination, right, where you're asked for a specific question, we're asked to come up with something, an opinion on something, versus you abstracting a content, the risk reduces, right? So those things are also important as you look at clinical space, what use cases we use it for. We should not, at least where we are in the journey, where the industry is in the journey of Gen AI being used in healthcare, use selection of use cases is very important. And I think that's the next question is around that. So I want to just, I think it's a good segue to the next one, but that use case selection upfront thing, is it the right one to apply Gen AI on, right? Is it a risk of hallucination or bias, right? Those kind of things you can think through and say, should we apply Gen AI? It's not a hammer and nail scenario, right? For that every use case can end up applying Gen AI for. So
But it looks
I
like
want to expand on that.
summarize.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Vikram.
I was just saying that summarization seems to be currently fairly safe for the use case for the Gen AI. I know that others are still being evaluated actively, but the summarization seems a fairly low risk that everybody has been adopting.
Yeah, one thing I want to add to what, I think Prashant brought up a very important point, the concept of human in loop. I think, if I look back at a majority of our client interactions, right, it's been in the operation space. It's member benefit operations on the payer side, there is provider operations on payer side, there is clinical ops, which is happening on provider and payer side, right? It's always the concept of, hey, we are doing these operational processes. We want to do this more efficiently, leverage the technology, and basically improve the productivity of our operations team, right? So I remember a pretty good example here. Member ops gets a question from a patient. He's like, I want to go see the doctor for this, this, and this, right? Where should I go? All right. It seems like a very simple question to ask, right? But there is an aspect of somebody checking their benefits, making sure they're covered, all right? Checking out who's in network, all right? Checking out price transparency data set for figuring out what is the cost factor involved with where the person wants to go. Checking out what the rating of that physician is, all right? Checking out what, from an authorization standpoint, if you need authorization or not. So a member operations person who has to answer a very simple question, hey, where should I go for this, this, and this, is probably checking 4 or 5 different things before it can answer the question around, hey, I think you should go here because of this, this, and this, right? And the use case of leveraging Gen AI for that, right, is amazingly helpful for the member operations person to cut down that conversation, which may take 15 minutes, to probably do that in about 5 or 6 minutes, right? So huge impact in the way operations team is able to get to that data set very quickly across different systems, different documents they may have to refer to, so that they can answer what would seem like a very simple question from a member perspective. So hopefully that gives some flavor as well in the concept of human in loop, which I thought was an excellent point.
Definitely, Harsh. Um, so we are coming up almost to the last 10-minute mark. Just wanted folks to be aware of it. How do we select the right partner for this journey, Harsh? Right. So there are so many things that you have to get it done right, and the stakes are fairly high at this point for our clients, for our the industry folks, right? So what is it? What is the approach for picking up the right partner, Harsh?
Yes, I think I would I think there are two different points of view on this I would share. One is, make sure whatever your organization's model is around Gen AI, right? If you're seeking a platform-based approach, you're going to find a partner that offers a platform-based solution, right? So I think that's number one, right? It's very critical to understand what your approach is as an organization, right? If you're taking a use case-based approach, you should find best in breed use case-based solutions, right? So I think but if you do actually truly go down the platform-based approach, it's important to find that the organization or the partner you're working for aligns with that mindset, right? If they're going to offer you use case-based solutions and you want to go down a platform-based approach, it doesn't help to have a partner set up that does not align with your intent, right? So that's very important. Second is, I think, find out how invested the organization or the partner is in Gen AI. Everybody will talk to you about Gen AI because that's the hot word, right? That's the discussion. That's every conversation is about that, right? I've seen personally, 15 plus companies that are doing exactly what they were doing, but now they say using Gen AI, right? I think uh, doesn't mean their solution has changed, right? Because they just added the words, right? So I think you got to know how invested the organization or the partner is in using Gen AI, and you got to ask the question, how are you using it internally, right? You got to say, are they eating their own cooking for that matter, right? And how many solutions have they taken to market? So I think that aspect is important, right? How real it is, right? One of the things we pride ourselves on Genzeon is, before we even came to the market with our platform, we already had a few clients working with us on very real use cases, right? So I think understand in the industry, are they viewed as thought leaders? Are they viewed as somebody who can speak at a level of detail, right? Anybody can use the word Gen AI, right? But do they understand what is LLM versus SLM? Do they understand what the cost economics of all of this is, right? Do they understand what the time to market and the governance guardrails that are needed to make sure you're not putting your stakeholders at risk, not just patient, but your stakeholders include your CFO. It includes your operations teams, right? It includes your IT development teams as well. They're going to come back and have to retest the model every 3 months, being worried about it's going to have hallucinations, then you didn't take the right architectural approach, right? So all these things matter. So it's very important to understand how invested the partner is in the Gen AI in terms of, are they the right partner in your industry vertical is another factor that plays into this, right? So if you are in healthcare, is the partner really focused on healthcare? Because Gen AI is not, we are not talking about selecting Microsoft as a partner, right? We're not talking about, hey, I'll use Chat GPT for everything, right? We have all seen that in healthcare, that's not going to be the solution set. All right, you need custom solutions. You want to folks to train on your data set, right? There is a need for private GPTs, right? Your private LLM models that are stood up in a safe, secure environment, right? That are compliant to your guidelines. You're sensitive about IP. All of these factors that we have discussed so far in this conversation, you got to be able to quiz your partner on this and say, hey, are they thinking along the lines that you are thinking, right? And most importantly, if I can say one thing, do they have a model to take, an engagement model that takes you from start to finish, right? Because folks get very gung-ho, hey, we have the greatest technology to do this, but can they take you from use case identification all the way to showing ROI in production, all right? And evolving and improving the model, right? So it's very, very critical that your partner is able to go along the journey where you are, right? If you're starting the journey, you make sure the partner is able to help you and assess the right use cases and take you through the journey. So curious, Prashant, on your thoughts, and I know there is thoughts around the whole engagement model that might be relevant here.
I think the next slide, Vikram, if you may, right? I
Yep,
think
sure.
um, so. This is what we call this is our framework to say how do you go about enabling Gen AI in any enterprise, right? So again, as Harsh mentioned, from discovery to building solutions, which is a factory model, and then implementation, operations, and finally the governance, right? That's the overall high level approach to the framework, right? But if I look at, I'll start with the discovery side of the street, right? So discovery of use cases. Again, evangelization for me is the first step always, again, because as I said, typically any new technology that comes in is seen as a hammer and a nail scenario. You are trying to apply it to every use case, right? But at the same time, finding those right use cases are always tricky, and sometimes you need those business stakeholders engaged upfront who are seeing that problem day to day. So, and to get there, you need to evangelize what the technologies, make people understand what it can do, and it's not seen as a hammer and a nail scenario. It's not a one solution for everything, right? But it solves specific problems. So evangelization is important, and then using that to approach to identify the key stakeholders, and then working with them to ideate and get that backlog, right? What sort of opportunities are available in each of their areas, right? Is the initial steps you do, and once you have that backlog, we we recommend you do some preliminary assessment, saying that does it. There are some we have some checklist we use to say does it pass the smell test, right? Is it worth pursuing? Is it worth digging deeper into? If it says yes, then go to the prioritization mode where you actually go a little bit deeper, right? Understand what is the potential impact, what is the business case, what if we do this, what is the value that it generates, right? Is it feasible to do this, right? That feasibility study is key for any use case. Saying, hey, do feasibility could be, again. There are multiple angles of feasibility which we cover in the next section, which is feasibility assessment. But high level feasibility has to be done, followed by does it align with the business goals, right? Is the problem we are solving, is it important for the next 3-year plan from a business point of view, right? And what is urgency for this? If we solve this, is it a business urgent problem, or is it from a priority point of view, urgency also plays an important factor, right? And then they're doing a double click into the feasibility assessment, which I briefly mentioned, right? One is what kind of solution is required, right? Is the solution that is required, is it is it something you build on prem? Do you need to use cloud? In the industry you work in, can you do something on cloud, right? And we know there are there are companies, especially in healthcare space, who work in this, say, Medicaid, right? It's highly regulated from a CMS guidelines on when what you can do on cloud was what you can do on prem, right? Specific approvals that need to be that you need to get before you can build any solutions on cloud. So solution approach is key. How, where, all needs to be figured out upfront, and followed by data, right? As we mentioned earlier, the questions about, we had at least a couple of questions on data, right? Do you have the data to solve the problem, right? Are there gaps in the data, right? What that will give a sense of what kind of data engineering techniques are needed, right? Followed by infrastructure, right? Again, it goes to the cloud versus on-prem, right? If you're going to run it on-prem, can you, do you need to go and purchase GPUs, right? Do you have the right infrastructure to scale and build the solution and using for Gen AI? And finally, do you have the talent, right, to do it, right? You engage with the partner, right? Long term, do you want to? How do you build the talent, right? You need to think about that as well. Moving on, I know we have a few minutes left, so I'll go a little bit faster here. The factory model is around, as I said, three big pieces: data engineering, which I touched on briefly, right? What kind of, how do you build data pipelines specific to Gen AI? How do you manage the cost structure using the right data engineering techniques, right? LLMs, right? Do you use something on cloud which is available through APIs, or do you build something of your own, right? And how do you can you do cost modeling for it, right, upfront, right? And how do you think about model training if it is needed, right? And then finally, human in loop interfaces, because as I said, many of these Gen AI solutions are being built as human in loop. And who is the end user? How do you build the interface that the end user can interact with the Gen AI model right now, right? All that goes into human in loop design, right? And finally, doing a QA is across the board is important, because we talk about hallucination, we talk about bias, addressing all that, right? That's the Gen AI factory model. If you do it right, it's a factory model. You're creating solutions rapidly through this, right? And then finally, implementations and operations. How do you deploy it, right? Having the right model deployment, ML ops framework is important here. How do you put the security and controls around it, right? How do you monitor, right? Again, monitoring also goes into the operations model drift, as we call it, right? Ensure that the models are not changing, right? And finally, the whole governance and talent deployment, right? Environment scanning to see what new regulations are coming, right? Putting the right data governance, model governance, value governance, all that to be looked at along with ethical AI guidelines, right? So I know went through that very quickly, and then I see a countdown of 8, 7, 6, 5 happening right now. So I'll stop and turn it back to Vikram.
No, thanks a lot, Prashant. I know we rushed up towards the end. There is always a lot to talk about on this topic. And thanks a lot, Harsh. I know that we did think about opening it up for questions. I was unsure if there were any questions. I didn't see anything on the chat. And if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to us and we can answer them.
Yeah, no, I think, and we can stay a little bit longer if there are questions, right? Or we can also allow for follow-up conversations as well. So I appreciate Prashant, Vikram. This is a great session, right? So I appreciate you pulling all this together. All right, so this is wonderful. But any questions from the team? Otherwise, feel free to please send those questions offline to us as well, and we'll be happy to answer them. So. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.